Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a vodcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished leadership individual, coach from New York, Mr. Todd Cherches. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ash. It's great being with you across the globe.
Thank you. Todd is the CEO and co-founder of BigBlueGumball LLC. He's the founding partner of the Global Institute for Thought Leadership. He's an adjunct professor of leadership at NYU and lecturer on leadership at Columbia. He's been ranked number 35 on the Thinkers 360 list on the top 50 global thought leaders. Wow. And he's been awarded and felicitated several times. Todd, what an impressive journey you've had. But let's
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
It took me a long time. It took me a long time in my career to find my niche. And one of the things I always say to my students is that we always use the phrase to be on a career path as if it's a walk in a park. I said my career is a career roller coaster because I've had many ups and downs, twists and turns, highs and lows.
Oh, absolutely.
But I finally found my sweet spot after many years of working different jobs.
Terrific. So let's start with talking about BigBlueGumball LLC. Tell me about this venture.
Sure. BigBlueGumball is my company. It represents the world. So the world, I don't know if you have gumballs in India, little candies that you chew on.
We do.
Okay. So not everyone knows what they are. But BigBlueGumball is a metaphor. We do a lot of work around metaphor and storytelling and visuals. So the world to us is like a big blue gumball. So it represents the world, the earth, the globe. And we specialize in helping make the world a better place, one manager at a time and one leader at a time. And to us, everyone is a leader. So that's our starting principle. And so we do management, leadership, consulting, training, and coaching. That's our area of specialty.
Very interesting. And, tell me a little bit about your patented visual leadership methodology. And I see your book just behind you. So we'll also talk about your book.
Great. Yeah, I have a few copies on the shelf behind me. It was many years in the making for, you can see I have a lot of books on the shelves behind me. So
are these all your books?
I'm sorry. No. Those are books written by many friends of mine. I started developing the habit of reading business books way back in 1998 when I was working for the American Management Association, and I was reading 3 to 5 a week at that time because it was part of my job, and I just continued that habit. So I've been reading one business book a week for the last 22 years. Wow. So I've read over 1,100 business books, mainly around management, leadership, and communication. So many of them are behind me. The ones that are facing out were all written by friends of mine. So I like to focus. In fact, John Baldoni's book, Grace, you could see it right here. I know you had John Baldoni on your show.
Yeah, just over your shoulder, I know.
And he's the one who introduced us. So visual leadership is about the application of visual thinking to the world of leadership. So I break it down to 4 different areas: using visual imagery and drawings, using mental models and frameworks, using metaphor and analogy, and using storytelling and humor. So when you do those things, when you use those techniques, you can get people to see what you're saying. So I always say that the key challenge in the business world, in the world in general, is how do you get an idea out of your head and into someone else's head so that they can see what you're saying? And that's the foundation. That's what visual leadership is all about. I break it down into those chapters or those sections, and then I talk about numerous ways to do that.
Wonderful. And is your book available on Amazon and the other digital platforms?
Yes, it is.
Okay, wonderful. So, Todd, give me an example of the power of visual thinking and visual communication.
Right. Well, one example, there's so many. So when you asked that question, a million just popped into my head all at the same time. One of them that I was just telling someone about the other day, I have a chapter called Ice, Rice, or Mice. So one time I was in a restaurant and I said, because my drink was getting warm, I asked the waiter, can I have some more ice? And he brought me a bowl of white rice.
Okay.
Right. So I said ice. He heard rice. So I always say, a good thing I didn't say, can I have some mice? Or he might have brought me some actual mice, little rodents. I'm just kidding around. But the whole idea behind that is how could when I communicated in words, I wanted one thing, he gave me something else, but whose fault was that? Right? Is there anything I could have done differently? If I had picked up my glass and I said, can I have some more ice? He would have known exactly what I needed, but they sound so similar that he filtered it through his lens, thinking, oh, this is what you must need. So think about all the time, and this was just a bowl of rice, and I needed some more rice anyway, so that was totally fine. But think about if it was a bigger issue. Think about times that you ask someone for something and you think they heard you, they think, they heard correctly, and then you get something completely not what you wanted, right? So it could be very costly. So one of the things I would say is, can you visually show someone what you want and need in such a way that there's no doubt, right? You have complete clarity and you can close that feedback loop. So that's just one example of, if I had pointed, if I had, there were other ways of getting your idea across. So that's just one of millions of examples of how we could use pictures or imagery or gestures even to get someone to understand what we're saying.
Fascinating. And this would, I guess, become even more compounded across cultures in different countries.
Definitely. And that was an example of in a restaurant, but I have many of my clients and many of my students come from other countries and speak other languages. So my PowerPoint slides are very visual. For example, many of my students in my NYU graduate class in leadership in the Human Resources Management program, many of them are from other countries, a lot from China, many from India and other places. So when you have a PowerPoint slide that's a visual as opposed to just text or no slides at all, people can, it just improves communication. I always say it improves 3 areas: attention, comprehension, and retention. And I talk about this in my TED Talk on the power of visual thinking. When you use visuals, when you use pictures, when you use visual language or metaphor, first of all, it captures people's attention because it's more interesting. Secondly, it increases comprehension so people can understand what you're saying. And thirdly, it increases retention because people will remember better if you use visuals or visual language than if you didn't. So those are, I would say, attention, comprehension, retention. Those are 3 powerful reasons why visuals are so effective in getting our ideas across, especially across cultures and language barriers.
Fascinating. So, a very large number of our viewers and listeners are under the age of 34. In fact, 74% of our viewers and listeners.
Wow.
And for them, I want to ask you, what are some of the leadership qualities that you think a leader who runs a large company should have?
I mean, there's so many, but one of them that really jumped out at me is always keep learning. As I mentioned, I'm a big reader, right? If you stop and say, oh, I already know everything, or I've read that one leadership book, so I know everything there is to know about leadership. One of my sayings is that in an ever-changing world, if you're standing still, you're falling behind, because the world is spinning and the world is changing faster than we can keep up with it. One of these sayings out there is VUCA, V-U-C-A. The world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? So things are changing and moving so fast. If we don't keep learning daily and changing daily, we're going to become a dinosaur and we're going to fall behind. So that's what I would say to everyone, regardless of age, but especially young people, because a lot of my students think, oh, I'm done with school. I'm done with I never have to read a book again, or I'm done with learning. That's just the beginning, right, of the next stage of your career. Marshall Goldsmith, who's a friend of mine and a guru of mine, he wrote the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's right above my head, and it's centered right there because I refer to it all the time. What got you to where you are will not get you to where you want to be unless you keep learning, growing, and changing. So that's what I would advise people, is you got to keep learning.
Fascinating. So now let's move to the Global Institute for Thought Leadership. Tell me about the areas that this institute focuses on.
Sure. Well, it's 2 things. One is it's a leadership think tank. So it's a group of people who get together and exchange ideas, all thought leaders, authors, etc., talking about ideas related to leadership. And secondly, it's a business consortium where we share leads with each other, partner with each other. And we just launched not that long ago, about 6 months ago. So we're just now in our infancy. But the whole purpose is to support one another as thought leaders and for business generation. So when the pandemic hit here in New York last March, in March of 2020, we were all at home, right? And they were on social media or Zoom. Those were our only ways of staying connected to the world. So this guy, Peter Winnick, who's the thought leader of thought leaders, he basically started this community and he just put it out there. He didn't know who would show up. And many of us showed up. In fact, that's where John Baldoni and I connected, although I've been reading his books for 20 years or more. And then a group of us from that group formed this, what we call GIFT, G-I-F-T, Global Institute for Thought Leadership. And we meet and we share resources and and we exchange ideas. So
Wow.
that's what it's all about.
Wow. So when I was reading about you, an interesting phrase came up, which is that if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a tribe to change the world. Help me understand this with an anecdote.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the saying. It's not my saying, but it's one of our mottos at the Global Institute for Thought Leadership. Basically, we can't do it alone, right? We think we can, or there's that saying by the anthropologist Margaret Mead, where she said, "Never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world." In fact, that's the only thing that ever has. So it really is the fact that we need to rely on each other, support each other, be resources for each other. There's a lot of competition, but there's also collaboration, right? So one of the sayings I love, this is not my metaphor, but I love this one. Instead of trying to get a bigger piece of the pie, try to make the pie bigger, right? So that everyone gets a nice sized piece, right? So just try, and right there, that's a visual metaphor, right? You can literally picture that in your mind, right? So I think that's the thing. It's like, it's all about respect. It's all about empathy and compassion. It's listening. It's looking at things from multiple perspectives. The cover of my book has this rainbow eye on it.
Yeah.
And the rainbow represents the fact that just as no one in the world has this color eye, no one I've ever met, that reminds us that, I'm sorry, the sun just came shining in through my window. That reminds us that no one in the world sees the world through the same lens that you do.
Correct.
So we need to, what I call, flip the eye, turn it around on ourselves, look internally at our own values, biases, belief systems, and assumptions, and then try to see the world with empathy and compassion through the lens of others, and then collaborate with them so that everyone is more successful. So I think that's one of the concepts that I
Amazing.
really believe in.
So let's talk a little bit now about the pandemic and how it has impacted everyone in the world. But my question to you is, how has the pandemic affected talent in the corporate world?
Yeah, I mean, it's really shaken things up. And one of the things I say is, years ago, when we would talk about the future of work was like 3 to 5 years down the road. Today, the future of work is next week, because no one knows what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to expect, right?
Well said.
The pandemic really changed the way we went from everyone working in offices, or many people, to everyone working from home, right? And then now it's this chaotic mix of some people at home. Everything's in negotiation now, right? Some companies will say, well, we want everyone back starting next week. And many employees are like, well, I'm not going. I don't feel comfortable, or I'm not ready yet. And then in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, depends on how the pandemic is doing. Some people are safer than others. Some people are more at risk than others. So it really has caused, 3 C's: chaos, confusion, and conflict, right? Because it's changed everything. And I just read an article for Inc. magazine called "Are You Ready for the September Shuffle?" It's hard to believe September is almost over already, but with the idea behind it being, when we hit September, when the summer was over here in the US, everything started getting all crazy, right? Like everyone's just trying to figure it out right now. So the pandemic, when it hit New York in March of 2020, everyone thought, oh, this will be just a few weeks or maybe a month.
Interesting.
A year and a half later, and it's still going, and it's still something. So it really is just shaking things up. So I think leaders, more than anything else, need to be agile, flexible, empathetic, and compassionate, and realize that everyone's experiencing this in different ways. But it's really made things more challenging, but it's also opened up many new opportunities for people.
Correct. And that's an interesting segue to my next question, which is that working from home partially, and some people working in the office. How does a leader manage such a diverse scope, area of workplaces?
Yeah, it's very challenging for leaders. I mean, people are still wrestling with that. That's my main focus right now in my management leadership training and coaching, is helping people navigate this new reality. There used to be something called MBWA, managing by walking around, right? Where managers would get out of their office and stop by people's desks and say, how's your day going? Or come on in and let's talk. You can't do that if no one's in the office, right? You can't do that if people are at home. So as a leader, how do you do that? How do you create that same connection with people? There's also proximity bias, right? If some people are in the office and other people are at home, who's going to get the attention? Who's going to get the promotions? In many cases, it could be out of sight, out of mind, right? So if you're working from home, how do you, or not only WFH working from home, but WFA working from anywhere, right? You could be doing a job in New York, but based in India, right? as long as you deal with time differences and you have the technology to do so. So it really has created this complexity for leaders to deal with, that again has opened up new opportunities, because you could hire someone. Your talent pool is not limited to the people locally to your town or city. You can hire someone from another part of the world now, right? So again, how do we frame this in a positive way and find the benefits? But it is something that we leaders are really wrestling with right now.
Fascinating. So let me now ask you a question on you being ranked number 35 on the Thinkers 360 list of the top 50 global thought leaders. Tell me about this institution and the indices that are used for you to get such an amazing ranking in the world.
Oh, thank you. There's a couple of organizations. One is Thinkers 360, and on that list they have different categories, and I just happened to get that honor of being ranked. And then also for Thinkers 50, which is considered the Academy Awards of Management Leadership, I also had the honor of being ranked in the top 8 in the leadership category. So that was a very huge, and I just did a webinar for them a couple of days ago, which was great, with the founders. So that was amazing. So I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, years ago, what drove me into management and leadership is I hold the world record from the most bad bosses that anyone's ever had in their life and in their career. So what happened was I started reading all these management and leadership books saying there's got to be a better way to manage and lead people than the way I was managed and led, which is basically just people being bossy and telling you what to do, and sometimes even worse. I had a boss, I write about in my book, who threw a box of pens at my head because they were not the ones she wanted. She literally just threw them at me. So I said, there's got to be a better way, to manage and lead with empathy and compassion. So I made it my mission to start reading all these books and discovering, and there's a lot of great leaders out there. So that's how I would the bad bosses is what drove me into discovering, and I developed this passion. And I said, how can I help change the world and make it a better place through better leadership? And that's why I teach at NYU in Columbia. That's why I do what I do as an executive coach. I'm trying to help people. So if I can help one person be a better leader, they can help 100 or 1,000 people be more effective in their career. So that's kind of what drove me into doing this, is my own career experiences. And I worked in the entertainment industry for a number of years before I got into management and leadership, which is kind of how my visual leadership methodology evolved, from thinking about the world as a TV show or movies, and the use of the application of storytelling and imagery to the world of management and leadership.
Incredible. But now I have to ask you this question based on what you said. For all our young viewers and listeners, how does one manage a bad boss?
That is one of the toughest challenges there is. I mean, one of the things I say is reframe it in this way. Your number one job is, as an employee, is to help make your boss and your company successful and effective. It's not about you at that point, right? So if you just forget that, am I going to get that promotion or the corner office or the title on my business card, right? It's not about that. It's about doing good work. It's about being willing to roll up your sleeves and raise your hand and say, I'll do it, right? Don't look at any task as beneath you. A lot of times people say, well, I have a master's degree. I shouldn't have to make coffee or do the filing. Just look at everything as a learning experience. Be a yes type of person. And then you become like the go-to person for things. So once in my early part of my career, I did a lot of menial tasks, but people would say, oh, Todd's very efficient and effective at that. Let's give him more responsibilities. Or I would raise my hand, even though I'm an extreme introvert, which people are surprised about because I talk loud and fast, but that's just because I'm a New Yorker, but I'm an extreme introvert. But I force myself to go out of my comfort zone. And that's when you go out of your comfort zone into the zone of the unknown, that's where you learn. That's where you grow, right? That's where you challenge and push yourself. So that's what I would say to people is, try things. You're going to fail. Don't say, if you try to be a perfectionist, then you're never going to take risks. Einstein said, anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new. It just comes with the territory. So if you go in, you want to minimize those mistakes and you want to learn from them. Nelson Mandela said, I never lose. I either win or I learn, right? So look at everything. So you can see learning is a key theme in my life, right? And because I just realized now how many times I mentioned the word learning. Look at everything as a learning opportunity, and that's how we grow and get better.
Fascinating. So Todd, I'm now going to move to the last segment of our conversation. All our viewers and listeners love to get to know the guest a little better. So I have time for 2 or 3 questions for you.
Okay.
My first question is, what would you say are 3 key milestones or pivot points in your life or your career?
I'm sorry, say that again because you broke up just slightly.
What would you say are 3 key milestones or pivot points in your life or your career?
There's so many, so let's say 3, but the first one that popped into my head, and I talk about this in my TED Talk, is when I was 30 years old and my company sent me to China to oversee a project. So I was hired by this company. We made theme park rides and attractions in Los Angeles. I'm from New York, but I lived in LA for 10 years. We produced them there and then we shipped them overseas. And I was a coordinator. I just figured, oh, I'd sit at my desk and do my job. But the project manager was promoted. So they made me project manager and say, oh, you have to go over to China to oversee the installation. Now, I didn't even have a passport. I had never been out of the United States before. I had a fear of flying. So I'm like, I can't believe they're doing this. So I was terrified. And I got there and it ended up being a career and life-changing experience. Just again, had I not forced myself to do that and push myself, I would not have had that amazing learning experience that I'm still talking about all these years later. Right. So that was one. Moving back to New York, I would say doing my TED Talk was a huge experience because you see these you know that red carpet and the TEDx sign are so intimidating, right? But I applied 5 times. This is another thing: be resilient and be persistent. I applied 5 times and got rejected before I finally got accepted to do one. So don't give up on the first or second chance. Just keep trying, keep refining and fine tuning. So doing my TEDx talk was an amazing experience. And then getting my book published last year, after thinking about it and talking about it, and I had 2,000 pages of content accumulated. Every time I had an idea, I'm like, oh, that would be a good thing for my book. And then people kept saying, you read all these books, but when are you going to write your own? And to get, not only to write it, but to get it published by a major book publisher was to actually hold this book in my hand after carrying it around in my head for 20 years was an amazing experience. Almost surreal. Even now when I look at it, I'm like, wow, I can't believe, because when you talk about something for a long time, when it becomes a reality, it almost seems like imposter syndrome, right? Is that actually real? But it is. So it's nice to be able to enjoy other people's feedback when they read the stories and tell me what they learned.
Fascinating. So I have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
The next question is, who or what inspires you to keep doing such amazing stuff?
My biggest inspiration is my wife. She's my biggest supporter, my biggest, she really boosted my confidence, like in terms of, you can do this. So it's really, we can't do it alone. It's good to have not only like people like the Global Institute for Thought Leadership, you have a think tank of ideas, but you need someone in your personal life who can pick you up when you're down and help you get through the obstacles, because it's not easy and there's going to be fallbacks. And so that's what I would say. My wife would be the biggest one. And then a lot of the authors like Marshall Goldsmith, who formed the MG 100, which is the global group of coaches, which I was just accepted into earlier this year, which was also on my list of amazing life-changing accomplishments.
Fascinating.
So I would say Marshall Goldsmith of the he actually, reading his work is what made me want to become an executive coach. So I had never even thought of doing that, or I didn't really know what that was or how it worked until I discovered what he did. And I said, I think that's what I want to do for a living.
Amazing. And my last question to you, and this is again for the young people. And I know you've spoken about leadership lessons, but my question to you is, what would your advice be to a young individual who's starting off on her or his journey in the corporate world?
One is that, a lot of times people feel like, oh, I need to pick a career. What am I going to do for a living? I know people who are 70 years old who are still thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? Right. Correct. So you're going to have multiple careers. Again, it's not a path, it's a roller coaster, and you're going to have ups and downs and twists and turns, but write it out and learn from everything, try things. I always wanted to work in the entertainment industry, but then I got a job offer from someone to work in the financial services industry for a fintech company. And I never thought I wanted to work for a Wall Street company, but I took that job, and it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I was hired to create and run their leadership institute. So even though it was a Wall Street company, they had a very cutting edge, fun culture, but I almost said no just because I had blocked it out, saying, oh, I don't want to work on Wall Street. But it ended up being an amazing, life-changing experience. If not for that, a lot of the things that happened afterwards, like my book, like teaching at NYU and Columbia, all the things that have happened since probably would not have happened, right? So we come to defining roles, roads or paths in our life, or forks in the road, and we need to make choices. And there's no one right or perfect choice. It's just a choice. But when you do, don't look back. Just keep looking forward.
Fascinating. Todd, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege speaking to you. Thank you for talking to me about so many leadership lessons. Thank you for telling me about your book, Visual Leadership. And thank you for talking to me about thought leadership. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.